and for a change, us coming together and building the Africa that we want, not the Africa that others want. An Africa that can no longer continue to be exploited, an Africa that can recognize value in its own raw materials. We take 60% of the world cocoa is out of Africa, and yet we don't manufacture cocoa products, but we do consume them. It has gotten down to shea butter, for example. That's a consequentially African product. African woman, you must have your shea butter. Now, the shea butter is coming here, it's going to Europe, it's getting repackaged.
The time to build the Africa we want is now. And those who have the role of doing this is we, the current generation. I invite you, my fellow brothers and sisters in the continent and those who are in diaspora, to listen the full speech from Mama Africa, Dr. Arikana Chihombori Kwao. Then let me know your thoughts in the comment section after watching the full video of Dr. Arikana Chihombori Kwao. This is Fact About Africa, the African channel where share thoughts and changing the narrative of Mother Africa. Let's watch this video till the end and then let us share our thoughts together in order to build the Africa we want. Now, by sharing ideas and each and everything through our sources, I believe we can achieve what we want.
Then back to Africa, now we're buying it again. It's insanity of the highest order. And I stand here to say we own that, because that should not be happening. Now, there are other more difficult mountains to climb. France is a serious issue for Africa. Hundreds of billions of dollars are going to France every year. Some of you may not be aware. All the minerals discovered and yet to be discovered in Francophone countries belong to France. All the oil discovered and yet to be discovered belongs to France. And the Francophone countries, they get royalties. That level of insanity has got to stop. But at some point, it takes also the African standing up. You see, if we continue to think and behave and act in a colonized way, what goes in comes out as colonized actions. I like to use a simple example. If two brothers were going to fetch water, one is black and sell water. One is black and one is white. The black brother is on one side of the street, the white brother is on the other. The black people, I challenged them. I said, whose water are you going to buy? Our colonized minds will automatically drift us towards the white brother's water because his water is better, because he's white. That mentality, until we cleanse ourselves. I was in Jamaica going through a resort, and four of us, all of us black, we were actually 6, and my godson and his girlfriend. My godson is black Jamaican with his white girlfriend were in a car behind us. So we were heckled at the gate. Do you have a VIP pass? And the Jamaican friend of mine says, well, I'm the VIP. And so we got ushered off to the side. And we had to walk all the way down to the reception area. We just wanted to have a drink. Well, a young couple behind us with a raggedy old car. We're driving almost a spanking new SUV. That didn't matter. With their raggedy old car. The next thing we know, they went through. So when we went down there, we were like, how did you get through? We were together. You don't have a VIP pass? And the Jamaican guy just busted out laughing. He said, well, he had his VIP pass sitting next to him. But the reality is that mentality, we have got to cleanse ourselves of that disease. No amount of education, no degree can cleanse us of that. We have got to wake up as Africans and realize who we are and believe not only in ourselves but in each other. Because it is only through our coming together that we can begin to take Africa where Africa belongs. We can begin to stop the exploitation that Africa has been going through. And as long as we remain divided and colonized, garbage in, garbage out. Thank you. This is when the colonial masters were giving up their colonies. As you all know, most of Africa was colonized by the British and the French. The French gave their colonies two choices. You can be independent with no attachments to France, or you can be independent with some attachments to France. They never really expected any African country to not want to be affiliated to France. But to their surprise, Guinea and Mali said, "Thank you, France, it's been wonderful, but it's time to go home." So this, of course, absolutely infuriated the French. And in their anger, history tells us that they went in, took everything that they thought they had brought to Africa, including the last teaspoon and the last chair. They proceeded to pour concrete into the sewage pipes, completely devastating the two economies. The then newly appointed president of Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah, in his efforts to help these two economies, created the first ever known union of any African states, which was Ghana, Guinea, and Mali. A few years later, a few states met in Morocco, and a few more met in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. By 1963, our Pan-African leaders decided that it was time that Africa begins to come together and rebuild that which was destroyed by the Geneva Convention of, the Berlin Conference of 1885. As some of you might remember, the Berlin Conference, that is when, after our colonial masters had traveled around the breadth of the continent, found amazing, powerful kingdoms with educational systems and religious systems, that they felt that the only way to truly conquer Africa was to make the Africans believe that everything that is African was bad and that everything was Western was better, particularly British. So by 1885, during the Berlin Conference, colonial masters pulled out the map of Africa. The more powerful a kingdom was, the more countries that came out of it. You take a country like DRC, it's surrounded by 9 countries. It gave birth to countries like Togo, Burundi, Rwanda, Benin, economies that clearly cannot survive on their own. It was all by design to make sure that Africa is indeed a truly defeated continent. Now fast forward to 1963, when our colonial masters, having realized that the only way we can survive as Africans, the only way that we can claim our rightful place on the world stage is to unite. So they made and created what was then known OAU, which stood for Organization of African Unity. It is during that formative meeting that Kwame Nkrumah proclaimed that you are not African because you were born in Africa, but rather you are African because Africa is born in you. You see, being African is a spirit. You just have to know it to see it. In addition, he also claimed that Africa was for the Africans and the African Union was now. Those words are as relevant now as they were then. By 2002, OAU was renamed AU as we know it today, which stands for African Union. The leaders meet twice a year to discuss issues pivotal to the continent. Recently, we just left the summit. We're talking about single African aid market. We're talking about the continental free trade area. One would then want to know, why is it that 54 years later, after the Pan-African leaders had realized the need for Africa to come together, why is it that the Africans have not attained that perfect African Union? Let's go back to Berlin Conference, 1885, and that seed of divide and conquer. I wish I could stand in front of you today and tell you that that seed is dead. Sadly, it is alive and well. Let me bring it home a little bit. Let's look at the other ethnic groups in the world, even here in the United States. Look at the Indian diaspora. They're organized, they're doing amazing things for their countries of origin in India. Let's look at the Jews. A small country like Israel is a humongous country because of its people. Its tentacles are all over the globe. They work together when it comes to issues to do with Israel. The Mexicans, the Chinese, the Irish, their voices are loud and clear. But when you ask for the voices of the African people, we are nowhere to be found. We can't even get along as people from the same country right here in the DMV. And we wonder why. Why is it that we're not able to create that perfect union? You see, my brother here, who cannot be part of a strong bond in the DMV, tomorrow he's the president of his country of birth. He's going to take with him that mentality of me and failure to believe in myself and in each other. And that's why, to this day, we still struggle to build that perfect African Union. What are some of the challenges? As you all know, Africa is the richest continent in the world. And it is the original continent. Some of you may not be aware, but the original continent was called Pangea. P-A-N-G-E-A. That's when the world was one. Through tectonic shifts, the rest of the continents kind of drifted off. And the one continent that never moved is Africa, which is why it is the birthplace of all humanity, which is why Africa is endowed with everything and anything that the world can ever need. That is a fact. Africa is the place where the rest of the world is looking for anything they want. I can comfortably say, for the most part, strategic planning processes by most countries start with what can we get out of Africa? The question then becomes, why is it that the richest continent on earth is the poorest? The continent where the sun shines brightest over the equator is labeled as the dark continent. Why is it that the continent that has everything is labeled as diseased and dying and is constantly at war with itself? It wars from a continent that does not manufacture guns, and yet we have an endless supply of guns. Where are they coming from? Well, the answer is very simple. You see, a stable Africa can dictate the cost of its goods. A stable Africa can take its rightful place on the world stage. A stable Africa cannot be exploited. Those are some of the realities that we have to deal with as we try to build that perfect union. Now, we do have our own issues internally. We got issues of democracy and good governance. Central region, for example. We have issues of terrorism. We got Boko Haram, we got Lord Resistance Army, we got ISIS. We are clearly not in a position to fight some of these challenges, particularly when continue to be functioning as individual countries. AU is working very hard to push the agenda of not only regional integration, but continental integration. Our fight against terrorism is like fetching water with a leaking bucket, with Libya being a completely open corridor, while the war against ISIS is being won in the Middle East. Guess where those terrorists are going? They're coming through Libya into Africa. We got 3,000 kilometers of the Mediterranean unprotected. We got more thousands of kilometers onto the Sahara Desert. They're just coming right through, and it is a very difficult challenge. You take that with the youth unemployment, it is a mecca for the terrorists to come and continue to exploit what Africa has, and you saw what happened in Libya with people being sold. So we have our own issues internally as Africans, the issues of corruption and good governance. African Union is doing the best it can. The Commissioner for Peace and Security, I call him the single-handed fireman. He's all over, running all over Africa, trying to negotiate and putting fires here and there. It's work in progress. But be it as it may, I can comfortably say we're beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to us coming together and building that perfect African Union which we desire.